Hi to everyone in the IFN community. My name is Dr. Maxie Gluckman, and I'm excited to share with you today a methodological workshop on curating and facilitating effective, interactive, and ethical focus groups for all of your fellowship and network engagement needs. Let's dive right in. So why focus groups? When we think about focus groups as a methodological choice for research, something really critical to understand is that they can open up space to generate shared understanding of participants, as well as context-rich insights that may not be able to be captured by standard methods such as surveys or one-on-one interviews. And as you navigate the supporting of shifting power dynamics towards those who engage in research, it can help promote a co-creation experience and collective sense making, aligned with equity center values that you may be bringing to your research, trying to move away from extractive practices. And participants can take more leadership roles in focus groups as they are semi-guided and offer an opportunity to build off of each other's experiences. So when you facilitate a focus group, this actually may help surface norms, tensions, or practical know-how through the interactions with different participants, as the prompts from different peers may unlock stories about their fellowship experience or their impact and solutions that individuals may not raise directly. And this interaction also can offer potential benefits to participants, including a space for them to have protected time for reflection, networking, and learning with peers. So one thing when talking about implementing focus groups is we invite you to take a pause and think, is this the method that's best fit to your goal? In this table that we see here, we look at some of the common research methods that we have created templates throughout the IFN, which is the focus group, discussion group, one-on-one interview, and survey. And as you're thinking about the focus groups as a potential method you might want to employ, the great strength is that this group interaction can be an efficient way to gather multiple perspectives, but there are potential limitations, including the risk of dominant voices or it being a less private space for sensitive topics. So as you're developing your focus group methodology, we invite you to think, is this the best strategy for what you're asking? And might you need to modify to either a different method or a different approach to your focus groups to make sure that we're creating a space that is inviting and safe for all that are participating in our research? As you can see at the bottom here, a critical aspect around interviews, focus groups, and multiple methods is the aspect of data triangulation. By having multiple methods that you're drawing upon, it offers a richer perspective to be able to provide not only the what is happening and the answers that your participants provide, but also the why behind those experiences by triangulating across different data sources. So I invite you to take a pause on this table and evaluate with your team if focus groups really are the right method that you want to use for the questions we're trying to address in the moment. However, if you do decide to continue with focus groups, we have created some templates for you to work with, but as you're developing your focus group methodology, some tips and tricks that you might want to consider around design are to create a question guide that tries to limit to around 6 to 8 open questions. And these open questions are intended to create space that doesn't have a right or wrong answer, but starts from asking maybe easier questions to invite trust building amongst the group, and then moving to deeper probes and follow-up questions as you go in and see the energy and dynamics of the focus group participants. As you're curating these questions, it's important to try and avoid jargony language, especially if you're working with participants that English might not be their primary language. And offering multi-modes for providing input can also be valuable. This can be represented from the ideas of maybe asking them to think ahead of time, providing them the questions, offering opportunities to write things down, or if you're in a virtual format, to actually put responses in the chat. so that everybody can share in a way that feels most authentic and right for them. Some other size and structure recommendations is we have identified through our experiences at IREX that around 6 to 10 participants is the ideal size for a focus group. In that way, everyone has the opportunity to share that wants to, while not having it go longer than the recommended time that we're suggesting is about 90 minutes for an online format to a maximum of 2 hours for an in-person focus group, and that may consider a break in between different sections. As you're working to compose your focus groups, a few things that you might want to consider are being intentional around group composition. And in this way, those that are there feel safe and comfortable expressing their perspectives. So in various aspects of research, there may be aspects of gender dynamics, program geography, other characteristics that might help mitigate any sort of feelings of discomfort or potential issues in terms of power dynamics that might exist. So we invite you to be thoughtful and intentional about thinking about who would be best to participate in each focus group based on the context and where you work, the program that you have been leading, as well as the cultural context. And we'll talk more about that later on. So what actually is the facilitator's role in a focus group? I invite you to think about it like a talk show, but in private. It's not necessarily being recorded. You are the host of the talk show, and so you're responsible for 4 primary things: setting and maintaining the ground rules or community agreements, making sure everyone who wants to has a chance to participate, creating a safe and trusting atmosphere, and listening and asking questions. And as you think about your role as a facilitator, I just invite you to think either with yourself or your team, how you might mitigate potential power dynamics, whether they're supervisors, supervisees, alumni with other alumni, or even considering a facilitator that might be another fellow may help to promote inclusion and feelings of safety and sharing perspectives from focus group participants. Some other roles that can be helpful when organizing a focus group, if you're able, is to have a dedicated note taker and an optional additional observer or equity monitor that may be silent and seated away from the group to be thinking about and tracking who is and isn't participating, to invite them or maybe have a signal at a break time so that that can be monitored and there can be additional opportunities to invite them to participate. Along the lines of increasing participation, what we're sharing here are just some research-based examples of potential suggestions for focus group facilitation. This is by no means comprehensive, but some questions that might help you get at both objectives of facts, data, reflections and feelings, and other things that might get at resolutions or closure and meanings and values. So I invite you to pause here and just take a chance to review these different questions and think how having these in your toolbox as a focus group facilitator might help address any potential lulls in conversations or allow you to dive in deeper into particular dynamics when you hear a participant's response. Because that really is the unique add value of a focus group, that you can go deeper. In spaces like a survey, you may not have that back and forth with participants, but in a focus group, you can have them build and share additional information and also connect to experiences based on what they hear from their peers. Some other tips and tricks around focus group facilitation is to think about how you're going to focus the discussion and to actually prepare ahead of time for some of these standard things that may happen, such as managing dominant and disruptive behavior, or even a silent environment. So if anyone has ever facilitated a focus group and they found themselves in a scenario where nobody wants to speak, or if everyone wants to speak at the same time, particularly if you're in an online space that may be harder to mitigate. And how do you deal with someone who won't stop talking and maybe monopolizing the conversation? So on the right here, we've shared a few different ideas that you might consider. And in the focus group planning guide, there are some additional ideas that we've curated from the IFN community. So one thing could be to put an object that is the speaking object and reinforcing a norm that when the individual who has the speaking object is using it, others should be providing attention, and then trying to maybe set some suggested limits on time frames for how long they speak. Open-ended questions can help to address if nobody wants to respond. And when someone won't stop talking, it is important as a facilitator that you are monitoring those things to create an inclusive space. So a couple of things you might say are, this is an interesting point. Perhaps others would like to build on it. Or I'd like to hear the group's reaction to what you said. This adds a validation that what the person is saying is of importance to the group, while also invites others to connect to it in a way that might be meaningful and move the discussion along. Another important piece when thinking about focus groups is not just the actual facilitation, but what you're going to do with the data that you collect. And in this, we call deemed data ethics and stewardship. You are the one representing that as the focus group facilitator, and it's important to communicate these things to participants both ahead of time as much as possible, as well as at the day of the focus group. And these are 3 points. What is your recording policy? What is your retention plan for the data? And how are you going to promote reciprocity? So whether or not you decide to record, it is important to understand how individuals may be able to opt out, but to define note-taking rules and quality controls, especially if you aren't recording. Consider if it is important for you to record video, as that may be more compromising to the individuals participating, or just audio. And when you're thinking about where that data will live in your server or within your team, who has access to it? How long will you keep it? How will you name it? And when will it be deleted? This type of data transparency not only supports the protection of participant voice, but also makes it known that you are someone who is being a steward of their perspective and really value their anonymity in the case that that's important, as well as how you're going to use that data to inform programming. So as you think about reciprocity, helping the participants understand when they might be able to see this data, if they're able to validate it through check-ins, it helps them feel valued, heard, and respected, both throughout and beyond the research process. And if you are able to engage them as well in the dissemination in certain ways, that can also be a really value add for participants who are interested in continuing to engage with your fellowship program. Along the lines of being a strong research steward, it's important to take proactive steps to mitigate any unintended consequences. While you might not think that your focus group is going to be tackling any challenging circumstances or experiences, it really is important to approach with the aspect of do no harm. And these protocols is really inclusive of a couple of these ideas. How can you generate and maintain a safe and brave space? How can you promote inclusion, center dignity of participants? And a couple of different things that you may want to think about intentionally ahead of time. What does informed consent look like? How will you be asking for approval around many of the things we talked about before, including recording, data management, and shareback? What does confidentiality look like, and what are the potential risks to participants if the data was to be connected to them? And being at all angles person-centered. These are individuals who have diverse lived experiences and may be coming to your focus group with different challenges that they're experiencing outside of the fellowship program. And it's important to be mindful that their participation in the focus group may interact with those, as these are full-lived humans. And being person-centered and thinking about these ahead of time can support the do no harm idea and principle. So let's look at a couple of ways in which you can do this. Creating brave spaces looks at two main aspects: safety and trust. In safety, we're looking at both the physical safety, but also the emotional safety. For example, having people feel included by offering signage or language uses or accessibility modifications, as well as mechanisms to keep people safe and accountable, including anonymous reporting, access to resources, including psychological first aid, which we'll talk about shortly, as well as creating different mechanisms to support them coming to and from, if it's in-person focus group spaces, so that their participation, they're able to do so freely without any unintended risks to their safety. In terms of facilitating trust, part of this can be garnered through the long-term relationships that many of you have with your fellowship communities. However, being honest and transparent is a really strong start, no matter who it is that you're inviting to participate in the fellowship. Following through with your word, if you actually set a date that you're going to share back data, or you're going to provide a stipend by a certain date, it's really important to be consistent and follow through, as well as to communicate any potential boundaries and limitations to your own work and delivery of data, as well as to the focus group itself. What are the ground rules and things that can and can't be shared beyond the space? In alignment with the person-centered idea, it's they have a voice and a choice in what action steps or follow-ups might look like. And this might mean actually being able to opt out of answering a question, as well as to be engaged in future dissemination and opportunities if there's any sort of co-authorship. These individuals may see this as an opportunity for professional advancement, and inviting them to share their perspectives could continue far beyond a focus group if organized and communicated ahead of time. Some additional factors that might help creating brave spaces is that when you're actually developing these ground rules or community agreements, you develop them together and you may reiterate them throughout the focus group, or if you have multiple sessions. Take some time at the beginning to actually get to know each of the participants and think about how to make the space inclusive, welcoming, non-threatening, and to mitigate any aspects around judgment. We talked about this previously, but designing groups that are intentional and also align with the topics to be discussed might help to minimize power hierarchies that exist in research. And in terms of physical space, trying to make it welcoming and safe, for example, comfortable seating, snacks, or drinks, can help some meet their basic needs. And that's essential to building trust and safety and active and engaging participation in focus groups. In alignment with that, it is really important to never force someone to share if they do not want to, and that all sharing must be fully consensual, and the group must know that they can stop at any point. This is in alignment with much of the work you already do across fellowships in different geographies and cultural and linguistic settings, but considering the cultural context you are in and modifying accordingly to ensure that active and engaging participation for everyone involved. Here are some examples of some ground rules that you may consider when you're designing your focus groups. Of course, this is not an exhaustive list, but it helps to get some ideas started and can be helpful to provide participants with some ideas as they're building their own lists. What is said here stays here, lessons leave with us, one person at a time, step up and step back, which means offering opportunities to step up and share, but also step back so that others can share. And again, this idea of consent and inclusion, using plain language and the opportunities to pass at any moment, and caring for self and others. I spoke about this previously, but one aspect of focus groups is that you may unintentionally address some sort of dynamic or personal experience that has a psychological effect on participants. And while the expectation is not that every focus group facilitator is a trained psychologist, there are some tools that you can have in your tool belt to support you if that were to arise, and to be intentional ahead of time. So this aligns with the aspects of mental health first aid. And this is including the approach. So assess the risk of self-harm and assist, listen non-judgmentally, give reassurance and information, encourage appropriate professional help, and encourage self-help and other support strategies. There's additional context and information we'll provide to you in the resources, but a recommendation, if we can be as simple as before the focus group session, identifying 2 to 3 sources of support and getting their full information that you can refer participants to if anything were to arise. Location, phone number, hours, days of operation, and the types of services offered. Preparing this and providing this to participants really demonstrates the care that you have for them. And even if it isn't something that emerges during the focus group, actually providing them with more knowledge of the resources that they may have in their community can also just be a demonstration of trust and care in the long run. So now it is your turn. We invite you to individually or in small groups with your team engage with the focus group planning guide. It is set up in 3 sections: the meaningful focus group composition and recruitment, the focus group facilitation strategies, and there also is a focus group planning checklist. This is a working document, so we welcome your feedback if there are additional things you believe should be added to this focus group planning guide, as everyone's teams have different and diverse experiences with focus groups. We will compile and anonymize what's shared across different IFN groups and communities to share back with the full consortium. And we invite you to use this guide as is valuable with your teams. So we will share the Google Doc for everyone to engage with, and it walks through the different research questions and the different guided aspects that you can utilize to have conversations with your team about barriers and about facilitation strategies to promote inclusion. Before you go, we invite you to think about how you may use these spaces with your own team, and to share with us through email or any methods that you have of communication what from today you're most excited about applying to your work, and what is something that you'd love to dive into deeper. We are available for office hours as is needed, and we value the opportunity to engage and support your teams throughout this process of research and learning more about the impact of your fellowships. Please do not hesitate to reach out, contact the IFN team, and looking forward to learning how those focus groups go. Hope you all have a wonderful day.